Hey guys, it's Damien.
And I'm Kenady.
And thank you so much for joining us. Now today we're going to be talking about toxic relationships. Kenady, there's so many people who've been asking us about toxic relationships, marriages, before marriages. We just want to jump right into it and talk about it.
Yeah, so I think before we get started, we need to first define toxic. What does that mean? Like, someone might be watching this like, what does toxic mean? Like, what are some definitions you might think of?
I think they can agree. It's something that is harmful to you, something that is harmful emotionally, physically, mentally. You're not in a good space and you're not growing or moving forward in your life. Do you have anything?
Yeah, I think also it's poison. And toxic can't be like medicated. You have to get rid of the toxin, whatever is producing toxin. Because no level of toxin is safe. Yeah. And so it's like toxic is harmful, like you said. You have to get rid of it. And so have you ever been in a toxic relationship?
Yes, before you.
I was like, at least it ain't me.
Yeah, so before you, it was very toxic relationships, right? Because I was lonely, I was feeling alone, and I wanted to fill that void. And so it was like a lot of sabotaging was happening, a situationships I'll call them.
That in itself, I feel like situationship in itself just breeds toxic.
Yeah.
It's like, because it's confusion.
And it's a lot of hypocrisy, a lot of acting. You try to put on his face. We just left a series at church called Church Face. So you try to put on his face like everything's okay, and we're gonna get into some of the keys or how to get out of it. But yeah, it was bad. What about you? Did you have toxic relationship?
I had ships, toxic relationships, more than 1, 2, 3. How many times? A lot. But I think also a lot of times we think like, oh yeah, I was in a toxic relationship with somebody, but I was toxic as well too. Like I was not innocent. Sometimes you can be, not the toxic person, but a lot of times you do have some toxic to add to the pot. And so that was me. And that's why God, right before you, I had to like sit down and like, bro, you toxic, slick. You slick toxic, bro. You slick out. So you had, I remember before we got together, you told me to read your book, #completelysingle, because you wanted us to be on the same page.
Yeah, we had to be on the same page.
And thankfully, I had already gotten a lot of things together before I read this book, but this just like solidified that I was toxic free.
So what are some of the things that we need to help the people look at before going into a relationship? Now, and we have to make a disclaimer, because we do have a lot of people talking about, toxic marriages. This is really not, we're not trying to tell you have to leave a toxic.
This ain't for that. This is like pre-married type thing, because you need counseling with that. We ain't trying to act like you can solve that here.
And we're going to pray for you, but that is a very tough situation.
But first thing I want to say is like toxic or non-toxic doesn't mean perfect, because like everyone has things that they need to work on. But again, toxic, like you said, is harmful, poisonous. It harms everything, and so we're not talking about that. But we have to understand that messy and dysfunction is not normal. Yeah,
messy and dysfunction is not normal. That's not God's original intent for a relationship.
Yeah, it's like sometimes if you're only used to toxic relationships, you're like, is this not what it's supposed to be? Like, no, it's not supposed to be that. So understanding that, despite if you grew up in toxic things, if you had a lot of toxic past relationships, that is not normal. That is not God's best.
The second thing I think is this idolization of the wrong loyalty. This ride or die. I'm just going to stick with this person because they're here. Talk about that a little bit, about this ride or die culture.
First of all, I ain't dying for nobody, but Jesus,
right?
Died to my flesh, and that's the thing. And it's not saying that I'm not loyal, I'm not down for the ride. But if you putting me in harm's way, bro, that's not okay. I think it's a pride thing, or like a badge that I'm sticking in this toxic relationship. I'm not just gonna bounce on the first. Nah, that's not wise.
And people are using Jesus too. That Jesus wouldn't leave you in your sin, and that's not what Jesus does. Yes, he doesn't leave us in a sin. He came to die for us. If your significant other is being chased by the feds, come on, man. You wanna, and we had situations where people have been killed because you're in their mess.
And that wasn't me. And I'm so glad you didn't have Like
a mess.
We have to understand, like, first, the only person we need to truly be loyal to is Jesus Christ. That's our first loyalty. And so if any other relationship interferes with that loyalty and what's best for us, we need to balance. Like, I'm a ride to live. Like, I'm here like for the highs and lows, better or worse, but it's not a toxic thing. Poison. You gonna drink this poison with me? Yeah. No, I'm not.
And the thing is, it's like, okay, if you see your mental health being affected, and your health diminishing, like emotionally, spiritually, and physically, it's time to have that conversation and let that person go. Okay, after 5, 10, 15 years, and y'all still in the same relationship, it's time to move forward. You have a kingdom business to accomplish. What's next?
Yeah, and so I think this is so important to not reject godly advice. Okay. Like, a lot of times people will say, hey, like, that person you're dating or like this situation you're in, that's not, like, you don't need to be in that. And that's why we also say don't date alone. Yeah, we say this a lot. A lot of times we can be blinded from the toxic. Like, I was like, bro, this is it. And my friends are like, bro, why are you dating him? Like, why do you talk to him? This guy is toxic. This situation you're in. And you know what I did? I no longer brought him around them. Yeah. I was like creeping on the low. But I rejected that godly advice, and what happened, it was damaging to me. There was things that I had to heal from. But it's like, don't reject that advice.
One of the things about toxic relationships with toxic people want to isolate you. And so they're going to continue to have excuses to come around your family, come around godly people, and isolate you. And we see this on National Geographic all the time. That little gazelle is bouncing, and the lion is creeping, and then attack, right? And so that's how the enemy works. That's why it's in the Bible. Like, he's a lion. God is a lion, but there is a lion also in the enemy who wants to attack you and get you alone.
And so that means we first bring people around our community and listen to their advice. Like, if they're there, they care what's best for you. They are not just hating on you. Make sure you have the right people that's speaking into you, Christian, spirit-filled believers that can talk. And don't be like me in that one situation where I was like, I ain't gonna listen to that. I'm gonna just creep on the low. And I'm up in here drowning in poison by myself. My friends don't even know. Like, I'm over here, but God. But God. Okay.
So the next one is take your time, but not too much. Take your time, but not too much. Yes, you want to see the person's character, the values, and all of that. And one of the things we say is a year is a good time to see people's habits, because scientists have said that over 30 days you can make a habit or break a habit, right? And so you'll start seeing the habits of the person. And they're gonna leave clues. Success leaves clues, and toxicity, toxic people leave clues as well.
Yeah, and I think that's so important that you allow time for things to be able to reveal itself.
It's a gift.
Yeah, it's a gift, and so it's like, don't rush, but also don't wait. Like, I think it's a balance, because we don't want to prolong to be with a person 8 years. I just want to see if you're toxic or not. Like, it's gonna come out before then. But again, just like, take the time. Don't rush. Because if you're dating somebody married in 2 months, you didn't have time for that mask to come off. Yeah. And so just taking time, being led by the Holy Spirit.
So we got 3 things for you real quick on how to protect yourself from toxic relationships. What's number 1, babe?
Number 1 is, let me see. You gotta first value yourself. Yeah. Like, you have to value yourself. You have to believe that you are worth non-toxic relationships. You're worth
so true
life-giving, God-honoring, pleasurable relationships. I think for me, when I was in those toxic things, it's like I didn't know my value. It's like, well, this is the best I'm get. And a lot of times the person who could be a narcissist or whatever, like, who else is gonna want you? Ain't nobody gonna treat you like I treat you. Ain't nobody want you. It's either me or be alone. And so valuing yourself, not believing the lies of the enemy, know that you're worth better. You're worth pursuing. You're worth believing in and being loved and cherished.
And number 2 is knowing God's original intent for relationships. Here's a secret. The original intent for every relationship is to be more like Jesus.
Say it again.
The original intent for every relationship is to be more like Jesus. People are your mirrors, and you'll see how selfish you are or how, quote unquote, humble you are when you enter into these relationships. So if you are not looking more like Jesus in that relationship, there's your clue. There's your red flag, yellow flag, whatever flag you want to pick. If you're not being more like Jesus, if you're not serving like Jesus, that's your clue to start having those conversations and maybe moving on from those relationships.
And so that means that relationship should be, and we're talking to Christians especially here, it should reflect Jesus Christ and the church, loving each other, serving each other, obeying God's commands, that life. What God produces is life. It's not death. It's not decay. It's life-giving, life-breathing. And that's the intent, to make you more like Christ and to be fruitful. Toxic relationships, only fruit that is bearing is weeds and you know, all that stuff that is not fruitful and not multiplying in a positive, godly way.
And what's the last one?
And so the last one that we want to talk about is trust God for your future. Whether that might look like marriage or whatever it may be, trust God and his plan for you. We don't have to try and control our future and trying to manipulate our future to be according to our plans, but trust God's plans for you, whatever that might be. But we have to let go of our plans, let go of what you think is the best thing for you, and say, God, whatever it is, let your will be done.
Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not unto your own understanding. With all your ways acknowledge him, and he will direct your path. The best thing to do is go to that first word that says trust. That means roll the boulder over to his side, wipe your hands, and turn around and say, okay, God, I trust you with this relationship.
So I think that's so good. Did this add value to you? Yes, we didn't go deep down into it, but I think this is enough to give us a new perspective and saying that toxic isn't normal. Toxic doesn't have to be your lot, and that God has better for you, better life-giving relationships with you. You just have to believe it and trust him.
So thank you so much for joining us. If this added value to you, put a like as well, and also subscribe. If you are looking for a good book to read, there's #completely single. This was a book I wrote in 2015, and it talks about some of these things. Again, my name is Damien Nash.
And I'm Kenady Nash.
And we'll talk to you next time. Bye.
Let go of them toxic people. This is a right I live, right I live.